Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dalene Swanson, and I'm speaking on behalf of my friend and colleague Karen Pashby. We're both from Canada, but we're not here today because I'm up in Scotland and Karen is actually working down south in England at the moment. We're going to be talking about global citizenship education in Canada and Scotland, contradictions, conflations, and comparisons. That's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about Karen, and I'm sure Tim might be able to share the PowerPoint with you, and certainly I'd be able to send you a copy myself. Those that would like to converse with us, here's some Twitter handles: Dalene Swanson, and for Karen, Karen Pashby. So we look forward to hearing from you. So global citizenship has increasingly become common parlance in schooling curricular contexts on an international scale. The prevalence of global citizenship education is reflected in Ban Ki-moon's Global First initiative and in its inclusion in the post-2015 UN Sustainable Development Goals. Research has demonstrated a growing attention to and contradictions surrounding the idea of educating for global citizenship. And certainly the field defies tidy definition, despite being a priority for international development and education. And Karen and I came together because we were both excited and alarmed about the attention given to given to global citizenship education, and we wanted to work together to identify some of the possibilities and the risks. So UNESCO suggests that global citizenship education aims to be transformative, building the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes that learners need to be able to contribute to a more inclusive, just, and peace world. GCE in this articulation is associated with ideals of diversity, and often its deployment is intended to evoke the full ambit of intersectionalities of the global justices. Yet what is set as a standard for progressiveness and a signifier for an open society often hides the more critical, contested, and uncomfortable interrogations that come with more critical, deep democratic understandings of the term. So at a deeper level of engagement, there is a paradox in the ethical imperative of GCE that global citizenship cannot merely be celebrated uncritically, that it needs to be to address political oppression and injustice alongside the complicities with its own discourses and performances in the social domain. So there is a tendency within a dominant neoliberal paradigm of a conflation of economic and social justice agendas of GCE. What are often very well-intended initiatives to encourage students to become global citizens often end up being quite reductive. A focus on changes in individuals' dispositions leaves unaddressed the relational complexities of global and local interdependencies, including deep engagements with difference and conflict. So in our comparative context, our interest in comparing possibilities and constraints of a critical approach to GCE and curricula in Alberta, that is because there isn't a Canadian curriculum per se, it's provincially based. So in Alberta and Scotland is born from our existing research into global citizenship from the purview of these two respective locales in which we also reside, excepting that Karen is now in England. We noted with interest that a number of thematic resonances had been revealed through discursive analyses of curricular documents in these two locations, and felt that a comparative analysis may uncover some underlying trends as well as possible situated differences. As these are both predominantly English-speaking regions of Western democracies within the Commonwealth, one ancient, the other so-called New World, one European, the other North American, we were interested in whether resonances between them may hint at some effects of globalization in educational policies in English-speaking regional contexts. Both of the curricular documents on GCE have been developed in the last decade. So the question we wanted to ask was, to what extent do these documents open up critical spaces for a complex ethical understanding and calls to action related to global injustices and political responsibilities, or do they foreclose important opportunities? So looking at the theoretical framework, we looked at some of the shifts from the post-industrial to knowledge-based economies and education as an economic exchange relation. And we looked at the postmodern as post as in after modernity and post as interrogating modernity. And it is the latter one that we wanted to highlight and foreground. And then talking about theoretical framework as well, committing to an interrogation of often unquestioned modern premises of encouraging global learning, recent scholarship on global citizenship has taken up the concern that despite intentions to the contrary, GCE often ignores the critical concerns of ethics and complexity that define how global inequities persist in today's world. The move to educate global citizens is often set as a standard for progressiveness and is a signifier for an open society, yet it also tends to hide the more complex, contested and uncomfortable interrogations that come with a more critical, deep, democratic understanding of the term. In this more soft appropriation, the work such a term might do in contributing to raise critical consciousness and engage the agency of activism and resistance to global injustice and oppression is often ignored. This ignorance, one could argue, reflects a politics of convenience, to use a term that I've used before, and if left uncontested can contribute to the common sense of modernity and its attachment to and complicity with colonialism. The global citizen is thus implicated in a politics of benevolence, to use David Jefferies' terms, that normalizes the conditions of the privilege that allows some to be in the position to help or make a difference. And so yet, young people live the realities of these tensions, and it is argued rather than leave these conundrums and political absences from GCE discourses unattended, many seek a humanizing education that engages with them critically. So looking at method, we used critical discourse analysis, and we looked at to examine dominant discourses and in which messages, which messages frame intended practice. So we took a close reading of each of the documents using critical discourse analysis and based on a synthesis of key concomitant political ideological concerns. So this framework seeks to deconstruct the critical messages inherent and behind the discourses, the ways in which they distribute messages of power, the assumptions the discourses construe, and the analyses that attempt to trace some of the discursive ideological effects of such distributions of message. So in our findings, we arrived at three broad themes. So looking at the Alberta curriculum, the first one was citizenship as individualism, skills, and interpersonal relations. So there was a conflation of citizenship with character and a tendency to reduce equity and diversity to mere prejudice reduction. If everybody can just get along with each other, then everything will be fine. Global citizenship as an extension of national citizenship was the second one, and here a notion of change is latent to a model of a straightforward progression through communities. There was also little attention given to tensions and conflicts inherent to differences contributing to the nature of Canada. And then the third was a more critical space that we found in the curriculum. Global citizenship as a critical space for examining national citizenship. Here the global connection strand of the social studies curriculum opens up critical spaces not evident in discussions of national citizenship. Words like interdependence, conflicting nature of societies and nations, tensions pertaining to economic relationships, sustainability, and universal human rights. So in the Scottish context, again, three broad themes. The first one was global citizenship as skills, interpersonal relations, and school management systems. Here there was a whole school approach, and there was school improvement emphasis and mechanisms that were tied to GCE and to administrative processes. It was thin on pedagogical, political, and critical intellectual fronts, but very strong on the school management aspect. Global citizenship as an extension of nationalistic citizenship. This was very strong, the nationalistic emphasis. Global citizenship was not tied to responsibilities to the wider world and to global inequity, oppression and injustice found within it, but to the ambitions and maintained privilege of the nation state. And then thirdly, there was some critical space found within it. There was some attention to global challenges that could be addressed through critical GCE. However, global citizenship is there easily bent to fit categories that suit the national curriculum's interests. So in our discussion, again, we found that there were three broad themes: global citizenship as social reproduction, the subjectification of the global citizen as one responsible to the state is also one which is individualistic, self-reliant and compliant with the state's duties and ambitions, including its global economic competitiveness, strong emphasis on competitiveness, of which the nationalistic global citizen is an instrument. The emphasis on citizenship as getting along and interpersonal skills, and then also citizenship as responsibilization, individual self-determination as part of the neoliberal project. And so responsible citizenship was a strong emphasis. And in our discussion, in both the Albertan and the Scottish context, there were possibilities for criticality and a transformative educational experience, but neither suggested sustained opportunities for deeply political engagement. There were critical openings evident to a greater or lesser extent with situated national cultural emphasis. So these either foreclosed or muted, they were either foreclosed or muted by a strong normative idea of an expanding citizenship responsibility from local to global via the nation state. And it overlooks and therefore makes unintelligible complexities and complicities. Key analysis, there was a difference between the two. GCE framed into social studies in Alberta versus the Scottish context. While it can be problematic to reduce GCE to a social studies topic, in Scotland the whole school approach reinforced global citizenship as a floating signifier and left it open to being instrumentalized. Overall, in both contexts, while there are some areas of potential, generally the treatment of GCE fails to accord with a critically conscious and politically engaging global citizenship invested in ethical conundrums, uneven power relations and contestations. So in conclusion, we argue that if GCE curriculum discourses through discursive ideological maneuvering are made to pay homage to state interests and the economic instrumentalities of the neoliberal state, their critical possibilities and transformative political potential is undermined in favor of that which takes the place of a critical and progressive educational approach. It could be argued that this may be more harmful in its false promises and which may, in its according practices, have a deleterious and anti-democratic effect on youth and society at large. Thank you very much.